What's going on, guys? Your boy Fluff here. Today we have yet another super powerful build for speed farming on the Barbarian. This build will do GR90s anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes consistently. It's really tanky, it's a lot of fun to play, and I think you guys are going to love it. So without further ado, let's get into the Slam Barb. Now, quick note, I was able to speed farm 90s in 3 to 5 minutes before I had a single augment on this setup. And before you even ask me what's better, Speed Quake or Slam Barb, there's really not a definitive answer. They're both really strong, really tanky, very consistent in that GR90 and under range. And once you get this juiced up, stat priorities the way you want them, fully ancient with some augments, this thing would be insane. Now, this build makes use of Razer 6 with the skill Seismic Slam. The Seismic Slam slams the ground with a wave of destruction that deals 620% weapon damage to enemies in 50 yards in front of you. And with this setup, we are using the Rumble rune, which says expend all remaining fury to cause the ground to shudder after the initial strike, damaging enemies in the area for 15% weapon damage as physical over 2 seconds. So how are we going to juice up Seismic Slam? We are running Razer 6-piece, as we said, and the 6-piece says every use of Furious Charge increases the damage of your next Fury spending attack by 2800%. This effect stacks. Every use of a Fury spending attack will consume up to 5 stacks. The goal is to charge 5 times, get 5 stacks, spend those 5 stacks to get 14,000% damage modifier on Seismic Slam. We're also using the Bracers of Destruction, which says Seismic Slam deals up to 500% increased damage to the first 5 enemies it hits. Another insane damage modifier. We're also using Fury of the Vanished Peak, which says reduce the Fury cost of Seismic Slam by 50% and increase its damage by up to 500%. Plus, we're using Focus and Restraint, which says when you hit with a resource generating attack or a primary skill, you deal 50% increased damage for 5 seconds. And then when you hit with a resource spending attack, you gain another 50% increased damage. 2 50% damage modifiers together is 125% damage modifier. We're also using 3 damaging legendary gems here. Bane the Powerful, which gives you 20% increased damage for X amount of seconds after killing elite, and 15% damage versus elites. We're also using Bane the Trap, which gives you up to X amount for enemies under the control impairing effects. We're also using Zai's Stone of Vengeance, which says you get X amount of damage for every X amount of yards you are away from the mob. So the further you are away from the mob, the more damage you do. Quick caveat, you can't just do this off screen on Seismic Slam, because Seismic Slam will only extend for 50 yards. So make sure you're not seismic slamming mobs off screen. It can only be within 50 yards. But still, even at 50 yards, Zeiss is going to hit like a truck. And then on top of that, basically every passive we run here is for crazy increased damage. We're running Berserker Rage, which is another 25% additional damage. Ruthless, 40% additional damage when they're below 30% health. Rampage, which will increase your strength like crazy, giving you crazy damage. And then lastly, we're running a Hellfire here with no escape, and that says increase the damage of Weapon Throw, Seismic Slam, and Avalanche by 30% against enemies that are more than 15 yards away from you. And anytime we cast Seismic Slam, we are going to be at range, so this is godly. And then for our last passive, we're actually going to run a Nerves of Steel. You are pretty tanky in this setup, but if you die in this build, you will lose your stacks of Raycor's Charge. And if you lose your stacks of Raycor Charge, you're going to slow yourself down a lot. And this is a speed build, so we want to keep those stacks. You could drop Nerves of Steel for something like Animosity, which would increase your max fury. And guys, increasing your max fury, again, will increase the amount of damage that Seismic Slam does with the Rumble rune. You're going to want to get maximum fury on your weapon. You're going to want to get maximum fury on your belt. Because the more max fury you have, the more damage you're going to do. And of course, max fury in your Paragon. And before you guys ask me, wouldn't it be better to run Animosity over any one of the passives that we've selected besides Nerves of Steel? Basically, increasing your maximum fury will give you additive damage, whereas every other passive that we selected here will give you multiplicative damage. So before you comment, Animosity would do more damage. No, it doesn't. We're also running Wrath of Berserker to get critical hit chance, attack speed, dodge chance, movement speed, and a 50% damage modifier. You guys can see how many damage modifiers have we read off so far? We got Raycor, we've got the raw damage modifier of Rumble, we've got 4 damage passives, we've got the Bracers, we've got Fury of the Vanished Peak multiplier, we've got FNR multiplier, we've got all 3 legendary gem multipliers. What is happening? We're also running Battle Rage with Bloodshed, which guess what? Increases your damage by 10% and your critical hit chance by 3%. But more importantly, damage deals 20% of your recent critical hits to the enemy within 20 yards every 1 second. Very, very strong in this setup. We're also running Warcry with impunity. Toughness is pretty nice, but Warcry could pretty much be swapped out with whatever you want here. I personally like Warcry for the toughness. You could run Threatening Shout with Falter. You could even run like Sprint if you felt like you needed the additional movement, or maybe even, you know, Ground Stomp with Wrenching Smash to pull mobs together and get out of there. But this is kind of what we've landed on. It's pretty nice. Now, we've talked about how we're going to juice it up like freaking crazy. Let's talk about how this works. So the 2-piece Raycore set says Furious Charge refunds a charge if it hits only one enemy. So that means if there's only one enemy on the screen, you can basically charge until the end of time, assuming you hit them with your charge. 4-piece says Furious Charge gains the effect of every rune and deals 1000% increased damage. Furious damage isn't going to be our primary source of damage here. We're literally just using charge to juice up those charge stacks, these Raycore charge stacks here down at the bottom. And as soon as that number gets to 5 and you have max fury, you're going to want to spend it with a seismic slam. So for the rune, it really doesn't matter which rune that you choose. Just make sure that it's a physical, because you know you are juicing up your physical damage here, so you know every little bit counts. And then lastly, we're running Ignore Pain with Ironhide. This build isn't quite as tanky as the Speed Quake build. This build, you know, deals its damage at range, so you're not too much in threat of taking a ton of damage, except for from mortar. So this is just going to provide that additional layer of toughness when you really need it. So of course, we're going to run Ironhide, which increases its duration by 7 seconds. And we're using that with Pride of Cassius, which says increase the duration of Ignore Pain by 6 seconds. So basically, you're going to get 50% damage reduction for 13 seconds, which is really nice. And we are trying to run as much CDR as we can here. More CDR means more uptime on Wrath of Berserker. More CDR means more uptime on Ignore Pain. Now, I would say a minimum CDR for this build will be that magical 37% number. And if you guys don't know what that is, Furious Charge will reset 100% of the time when hitting 3 targets. And having that 37% cooldown reduction means you have to worry less about how many mobs you are charging into. Just as long as you're not charging into 2. 2 is the only number that's gonna F you over basically in this setup. So keep that in mind. In the cube, we are running the Furnace, another damage modifier, and particularly against elites, this is really, really nice. This is gonna make it so even at GR90, you can one-shot elites, 2-3 shot elites. It's insane. The amount of damage modifiers you have going on in this build is just nutso. Nemesis, you're not running Ingyam here, but again, guys, Nemesis do speed up the progression of any rift. So if you're interested in speed, Nemesis is almost a must. And then, of course, Band of Might, which gives us a flat 80% damage reduction after casting charge. And we're spamming charge like crazy, so this is going to be up 100% of the time. And 80% damage mitigation is just nutso, guys. I talked about it before. It's so good. The only things you really need to pay attention to in this setup is you're not casting Seismic Slam before you get your 5 stacks of Raycore's charge. You also need to make sure that you're at maximum fury before you spend your 5 stacks. You want to make sure you're at range, the maximum range you can possibly do at 50 yards. And then you keep up your focus and restraint. Now, focus and restraint is exceptionally good on the Barbarian because Barb's one of the few classes that can do a resource generating attack on the move with either leap or Furious Charge. But you're pretty much going to keep up FNR naturally. You're probably going to cast a Seismic Slam once every 5 seconds. You're definitely going to cast a charge once every 5 seconds. You really won't have to focus too much on trying to keep that effect up. It'll just happen organically. But we just want to show you guys what this looks like. So say this was an elite pack. I'm going to zoom out before we cast the slam and then hit them with the slam. And you can just see it just absolutely melts their faces. It's crazy. And keep in mind, it does hit like a frontal cone, and you'll see those little rumbles going off. And it does last for 2 seconds. So it's an interesting playstyle. You know, you charge, you're up in their face, charge. And then before you cast your Seismic Slam, you charge out, cast your Seismic Slam, get that 50-yard damage bonus, and then get right back in there, charge. And you'll see that in the gameplay above. We talked about skills, we talked about passives, we talked about gear, talked about legendary gems. Let's just quickly go over stat priority. This is a high cooldown based build. Again, guys, more cooldown means more uptime on Ignore Pain, more uptime on Wrath of the Berserker. Hitting that 37% mark on cooldown reduction will also reset your charge on 3 targets. So, gloves, you would want strength, crit chance, crit damage, and cooldown reduction. Shoulders, strength, bite, cooldown reduction. You could go all res or area damage here, depending on how much toughness you think you need. Helmet, strength, crit chance. You could even go seismic slam damage here on the helmet. Chest, strength, bite, life, sockets would be ideal. Belt, strength, bite, all res, and life per fury spent would be really nice. Pants, strength, bite, all res with sockets. Boots, strength, bite, all res, and seismic slam would be ideal. Focus and restraint, just like most of the builds you've seen so far, you're gonna want the dream rolls, crit chance, crit damage, cooldown reduction, socket on both rings. Bracers, you're gonna want to juice up physical damage here, so physical damage, strength, fight, crit chance. Same thing with the neck. If you get a physical damage roll, that'd be great. But crit damage, crit chance are the important rolls with socket. And finally, the weapon. And the weapon's kind of weird. It rolls like this damage roll on a particular skill, which is kind of strange. So the dream would be to get something you could roll off that crappy skill damage on. So you'd have to get, 3 primary stats that were really, really good. It's also really cool in the sense that this item will have 5 primary stats, which is mind-blowing. So I definitely recommend, percent damage, strength, life per fury spent is so good in this build. 1 seismic slam will heal you to full. You can also spam some battle rage bloodsheds as you're charging around, and the sheer amount of life per fury spent that you're going to have between your belt and your weapon will heal you for a decent amount while spamming that battle rage bloodshed. Plus you're charging so fast that you can just regenerate that fury like crazy. And lastly, I'd probably do something like either vitality for more toughness, cooldown for more uptime on your skills, or even area damage. But for speed 90s, I'd probably stick to cooldown reduction. But that's basically gonna do it. As you guys can see here, our gear isn't super great. We could speed 90s pretty well already. I'd love to try to get this juiced up and see how fast it could do it then. But really, really strong build. We tried a lot of, speed 90 setups, and we just found that, speed quake and this slam barb were a bit more consistent than some of the others. And we'll be doing a lot more testing on the barb on PTR on the stream. But we just wanted to get these builds out, share them with you guys. They're a ton of fun to play. We're super excited about barb being good again. It deserves it. And that's basically going to do it for the guide. Big shout out to all my supporters on Twitch, YouTube. We love you guys. Every little bit you send our way really, really helps out. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, please comment in the section below, or anything to add to the build, you can do that as well. As always, guys, like, subscribe, come over to Twitch, ask your questions. We love you guys. Peace out.